When my brother dropped a set of shiny brass keys onto the dinner table, my mother choked back tears of pride. $60,000, Brandon, she beamed, resting her hand over his. A down payment for your forever home. A man needs security. I sat across from them waiting. I had spent 6 years grinding, saving every spare penny, working extra shifts to build a life. But when I asked my father if they could assist me with just a fraction of that support for my own property, he didn't even look up from his plate. You're a woman, Emily, he said flatly. You don't need a house. Go rent somewhere. They thought that sentence was the end of the conversation. They thought it put me in my place. They had no idea that those 4 words didn't break me. They triggered a silent plan that would flip our entire family dynamic upside down. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been a project manager. Not just in my job, but in my own life. I'm the kind of person who plans 3 steps ahead, keeps her head down, and works until the job is done. But in my family, hard work was never the currency that bought you love or respect. That privilege belonged entirely to my younger brother, Brandon. Brandon was 29, but to my parents, he was still their precious boy who could do no wrong. Whenever he failed, they built him a bridge. Whenever I succeeded, they treated it like a basic expectation. I had spent 6 grueling years pulling overtime, living frugally and stacking every single spare dollar into a high-yield account, aiming to buy my first home. Then came that Sunday dinner. The roast chicken was barely carved when my mother set down her fork, practically glowing. Brandon pulled out a shiny set of brass keys and let them clink against his plate. My mother's eyes welled up with tears. $60,000, she beamed, squeezing his arm like he had just won a Nobel Prize. Your father and I wired the down payment this morning. A real home for a boy. A man needs security. I sat frozen. I looked at my father, taking a breath to speak. Dad, I've been saving for years to buy a place too. Is there any way you could help me with even a small fraction of that? My father didn't even stop chewing. He didn't even look up from his plate. You're a woman, Emily, he said, his voice flat and completely devoid of emotion. You don't need a house to your name. Go rent somewhere. I didn't scream. I didn't drop my fork, push my chair back, or let a single tear slip down my face. Experience had taught me that giving my parents an emotional reaction only gave them fuel. They wanted me to bow my head, accept my assigned role as the beautiful, quiet daughter, and sign a lease on some overpriced apartment. So I took a slow sip of water, looked my father straight in the eye, and said, I understand. My brother smirked, twirling his new house keys around his index finger. My mother offered a patronizing pat on my hand, whispering that renting was just more practical for a single woman. They thought the matter was settled. They thought they had put me in my place. They had no idea that the moment I walked out of that house, the grieving daughter died and the strategist took over. I didn't waste my hard-earned savings trying to copy Brandon's move. He had just bought a sprawling single-family home in the suburbs that would drain him in property taxes, HOA fees, and maintenance. Instead, I spent the next 3 weeks analyzing market trends, zoning maps, and foreclosure listings. I found exactly what I was looking for: a rundown, neglected duplex in a neighborhood that was just beginning to gentrify. It was ugly, covered in peeling paint, and completely overlooked by traditional buyers. But the structure was solid, and the math was undeniable. I put down my own cash, pulled an FHA loan, and closed on the property entirely in my name. No handouts, no parental favors, just cold, hard execution. The keys to my duplex felt heavy in my hand, but unlike Brandon's, mine represented total freedom. The building needed work, so I moved directly into the smaller one-bedroom unit downstairs. Every weekend, while my friends were out at brunch and Brandon was hosting flashy housewarming parties, I was in safety goggles and paint-splattered jeans. I replaced rotted drywall, laid down luxury vinyl plank flooring, and swapped out outdated light fixtures myself, keeping renovation costs to an absolute minimum. Once the larger upstairs unit was renovated, I put it on the rental market. Within 4 days, I signed a 2-year lease with a quiet, reliable young couple. Their monthly rent didn't just cover the mortgage for the entire building. It left me with an extra $300 in pure profit every single month. I was living completely for free while building equity in a real estate asset. Whenever my family asked about my living situation, I played the part they expected of me. Just a small place across town, I'd say with a modest shrug during our monthly dinners. It gets the job done. My parents would nod approvingly, convinced I was following their orders to rent somewhere. Meanwhile, Brandon couldn't stop complaining. Every dinner became a monologue about his rising property taxes, a leaking roof, or the outrageous cost of furnishing 4 bedrooms. He was house rich and cash poor, buried under a massive mortgage and lifestyle inflation, constantly leaning on my parents for extra cash to keep his head above water. I sat back, ate my dinner, and kept my mouth shut. They thought I was struggling to pay rent in some cramped apartment. In reality, I was stacking my salary, collecting rent, and silently planning my next move. 2 years slipped by quietly. While Brandon sank deeper into an expensive lifestyle he couldn't afford, I played a completely different game. The steady cash flow from my first duplex combined with my project management salary had built up a very healthy reserve. Instead of buying a flashy new car or taking exotic vacations, I leveraged the equity in my duplex to acquire a second distressed multifamily property, a rundown triplex across town. I repeated the exact same playbook. I gutted the neglected units over a few weekends, brought in reliable tenants, and let the rental income completely cover the second mortgage. Within another year, I even added a small commercial storefront to my growing portfolio. By my 32nd year, I didn't just own a place to live. I owned 4 cash-flowing properties, generating a monthly income stream that quietly rivaled my day job. Meanwhile, Brandon's world unraveled. The shiny veneer had completely worn off his forever home. Skyrocketing property taxes, major plumbing disasters, and constant lifestyle inflation drained his bank accounts dry. He was perpetually calling our parents, begging for financial bailouts to cover credit card shortfalls and mortgage payments. My parents, wrapped up in protecting their golden boy, started dipping into their own retirement funds to rescue him, completely blind to the fact that they were pouring cash into a bottomless pit. At our monthly family dinners, the contrast was stark. Brandon looked stressed, his eyes darting anxiously whenever money was mentioned. He complained endlessly about how difficult it was to maintain a house and how taxes were bleeding him dry. My parents nodded sympathetically, glancing at me as if thanking God their daughter was safely renting somewhere and avoiding all these terrible headaches. I sat right across from them, cutting my steak and offering gentle nods of agreement. They had no idea that the dismissed daughter they told to rent somewhere was quietly building a real estate empire right under their noses. The illusion finally shattered on a rainy Tuesday evening. I received an urgent text from my mother demanding I come over to Brandon's house immediately for a family meeting. When I walked through his massive double doors, the atmosphere was suffocating. Brandon was pacing the hardwood floor, pulling at his hair while my mother sat on his plush leather sofa, dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue. My father looked 10 years older, staring blankly at a pile of overdue notices spread across the kitchen island. Brandon had hit a wall. Between unpaid property taxes, home equity loans he'd taken out to fund vacations, and back-to-back credit card defaults, he was facing imminent foreclosure. He needed $45,000 by the end of the month just to clear the liens and stop the bank from auctioning off his forever home. My father cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "Emily," he began, his voice devoid of its usual authority. "Your brother is in a tight spot. Your mother and we've given him everything we can. Our savings are drained. We need you to help your brother." My mother pleaded, taking my hand with a sudden, desperate warmth I hadn't felt in years. "You've been living so frugally. You don't have house payments or maintenance costs since you're just renting. You must have saved up a decent emergency fund." I stared at them in utter disbelief. They had spent decades favoring Brandon, throwing $60,000 at him while telling me to run along and rent. Now, after pouring their own retirement down the drain to enable his terrible choices, they were turning to me to clean up his mess. They genuinely believed that my single, quiet life was an invitation to bail out their golden child. I pulled my hand out of my mother's grip and took a step back. "No," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "I'm not giving Brandon $45,000. The room went dead silent. Brandon stopped pacing, his face twisting into instant rage. "Are you serious, Emily? You're going to let your own brother lose his home over a handful of cash you're just hoarding in a bank account? You had a $60,000 head start, I reminded him coldly. You had Mom and Dad paying off your mistakes for 6 years. You chose to live beyond your means. You don't understand how real life works, Brandon shouted, slamming his fist onto the island counter. Must be nice sitting comfortably in your little rental while my entire life is on the line. What do you even know about owning a house anyway? I looked at him, then turned my eyes toward my father, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and anger. I took a deep breath and delivered the words I'd waited years to say. Which one? I asked softly. Brandon blinked, caught off guard. What? Which house are you asking me about, Brandon? I stepped closer to the table, looking each of them in the eye. The duplex on 5th Street that I bought 6 years ago, the triplex on Elm Street that pays for itself twice over, or the commercial property downtown that nets me 5 figures a month. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. My father's jaw dropped. I don't rent anywhere, I said, my voice cutting through the thick silence. I own 4 income-producing properties. I didn't waste my money trying to look rich. I built actual wealth because 6 years ago you told me I didn't deserve a home, so I went out and bought 4. The silence in that kitchen was absolute. My mother's hands began to tremble, and my father looked at me, not as the quiet daughter he had dismissed, but as a total stranger who had completely outsmarted him. Brandon just stood there, his mouth open, the anger instantly drained from his face and replaced by absolute humiliation. They had spent years believing they had put me in my place, thinking I was subserviently taking orders to rent somewhere. They never realized that while they were busy funding Brandon's fragile ego, I was building an empire in the shadows. I didn't give Brandon a single dime. He was forced to sell his luxury house at a loss, clear what debts he could, and move into a modest 1-bedroom apartment to finally learn the meaning of financial responsibility. My parents had to face the bitter reality that their favoritism hadn't secured their son's future. It had ruined it. As for me, I kept expanding my portfolio. Being told I didn't deserve a home wasn't the insult my father intended it to be. It was the catalyst that changed my life forever. It proved that true security isn't given through handouts. It's built through silent, relentless determination. Now, I'm curious about you who are listening to my story. What would you have done if your family told you to rent somewhere while giving everything to your sibling? Would you have bailed them out? Let me know in the comments below.